In the pub at Microlight station, there's dismay at plans for a new market town of up to 8,000 houses, covering more than 1,000 acres around this small community.
There's a very strong feeling that it's the wrong town in the wrong place.
Most people who live around here do so because it's a rural area and they don't want to be surrounded. If they wanted to live in a town, they go and live in a town.
It's not a good idea to build a large town here when you've got Basingstoke, 10 miles up the road, Winchester, 8 miles down the other side. I think it's a disaster. Prime arable land. I think they should scale it down considerably. You've got to build houses for local people, but not to build a huge town. I don't think it's a good idea.
The developers who've been fighting since 1990 to build this new town claim it will provide much-needed new homes for people in Hampshire.
The issue is how and where is it best to provide the homes and jobs that are needed in Hampshire to meet the needs of its own population. And a new market town at Microlight station, because it's surrounded by roads with spare capacity, it's on the main railway line, there's an existing station, and Eagle Star will be providing all the community facilities, the schools, the parks that are needed to make a new community work.
The scale of the Microlight proposal is unique, but campaigners say it's part of a trend which puts more than 600 square miles of rural Britain at risk over the next 20 years.
It's not just the single development, it's what that could lead to. At the moment, it's open greenfield site, pleasant rolling productive farmland, basically. That's what you have here. And it could actually lead to a major train of development that could lead from Basingstoke to Winchester to Southampton. And that's the kind of thing which we think is reprehensible. That kind of sprawling development is entirely wrong in the modern context.
If the developers have their way, this entire area will be covered in houses. Everyone agrees there is a need for new homes, especially in the crowded southeastern corner of England. But the message of today's conference is that there is an alternative to building on greenfield sites such as this. About 70 miles to the northeast, the old brewery at Romford lies idle on a 19-acre site at the heart of a busy urban area. There are plans to turn it into a shopping and cinema complex, but the organisers of today's conference say sites like this could help to take pressure off rural areas if there were incentives to provide housing instead.
There are an awful lot of sites like this, and we do believe that much more housing could be provided in urban areas, but we need to see the government channel investment into these sort of sites and to take away the subsidies that currently favour greenfield housing.
Developers argue that urban sites can only provide a small part of the solution, but campaigners believe that a concerted campaign to prevent what they claim is the concreting of the countryside will force politicians to change their priorities. Tim Hirsch, BBC News.
President Clinton will make legal history when he gives evidence to the lawyers of the woman who says he sexually harassed her. Paula Jones is accusing the president of indecently propositioning her when he was the governor of Arkansas. Mr. Clinton has denied the claim and says the case won't be settled out of court. He's due to testify on videotape today in the run-up to the case. It'll be the first time a serving president has given evidence under oath as a defendant.
After weeks of ice storms and sub-zero temperatures, the big thaw has finally begun in Canada. The freezing weather hit a record low for the country and claimed 16 lives. There were power blackouts and many cities were almost brought to a standstill. But now electricity has been restored and businesses have reopened.
A British pilot has completed an epic journey to Australia by Microlight, breaking the current world record by 10 days. Colin Bodell, who's a Microlight instructor, landed in Sydney in the early hours of this morning. He left London just over 6 weeks ago and has flown 14,000 miles. And we hope to be speaking to him later this morning.
It's a dreadfully long way to go in a Microlight. Why couldn't have just got a long-haul flight like everybody else? The newspapers this morning, The Guardian, we have the problems in cricket, although in fact this is actually the first black man to play for South Africa. England, as we were hearing and will be hearing in sport, have been struggling a wee bit. UK ready to fight Saddam. The stoking up of the situation there. We've heard HMS Invincible on the way, and we shall have more on that as well soon.
The Daily Telegraph is the paper with the story that care in the community is to be scrapped. Frank Dobson did an interview with them yesterday and made the comments about the future of seriously disturbed psychiatric patients. The photograph, as with many of the papers this morning, is of Sundance, the fugitive Ginger Tamworth, who's recaptured yesterday and had to be tranquilised.
and he makes it in the Mail as well, safe after a pig of a day. This is where the story comes from, that Tony Blair is expected to make the apology over Bloody Sunday in Northern Ireland. Expected to make it as early as next week. This is according to sources the Mail has spoken to. The Mail describes it as another huge concession to Republicans in the peace process, the concession being the actual apology.
Taking a look at, just a quick look at some of the tabloids. Nearly all the tabloids actually leading on the story of the Britain's oldest mum, 60-year-old Liz Buttle. The Mirror has what they call an exclusive, which is a shot of her with the Chippendales. Mum's 60 and Chippendales.
Yeah, anyway. The Independent, the fight for Green Britain, hearing again a story about house building, the controversy there. That's how the Independent does it. The picture making the point. That's the newspapers this morning.
You're watching BBC News 24.
Nature has her own law.
Her mood may be beautiful, it may also be brutal.
We make the physics of the troposphere our business.
The first signs of pressure-filled activity are captured and tracked by weather stations across the UK and worldwide. The weather isn't just about words. Witness it.
The weather. Twice an hour, 24 hours a day, experienced on News 24.
It's 6:15, taking a look at our headlines. Seriously disturbed psychiatric patients to be returned to secure units in a major change of the care in the community programme. About 50 Gulf War veterans are due to return their medals to the Ministry of Defence today in protest at the government's handling of Gulf War syndrome. 21 people have died after a Cypriot-registered cargo ship sailing from Rotterdam to Montreal sank off the coast of Newfoundland. And protest groups fighting government plans for millions of new homes around Britain are meeting in London today, hoping to form a national force to protect rural areas.
Now, Tim Henman, Alan Shearer, it's all happening in the world of sport today. Robin Bailey's here, except actually it's not all quite happening for Tim, is it? Good morning, Robin.
No, it isn't, Chris, you're quite right. Henman has been beaten in the final of the Sydney International Tournament this morning. He lost to Slovakian Karol Kuchera in straight sets, 7-5, 6-4, failing to capitalise on that marvellous semi-final victory over world number 2 Pat Rafter.
It wasn't to be for Tim Henman, despite a blistering start to his final. The British player opened a 4-love advantage in the first set, but once Kuchera had sorted out his high ball toss in the blustery conditions, he became a different player. Kuchera raced away with the next 4 games as errors crept into Henman's game, and the Slovakian went on to take the set 7-5. When Henman was broken in the first game of the second set, he received a code violation warning for slamming his racket into his chair. But the loss of that game was of more damage, even though he broke back, because Henman was broken again to go 2-1 down. He couldn't make up the deficit, losing the second set 6-4, and was left with only the consolation of his $34,000 Australian runners-up check.
And in the women's final, Arantxa Sanchez Vicario was the Sydney champion, beating American teenager Venus Williams 6-1, 6-3. Now, on the penultimate day of the World Swimming Championships in Perth, the British women's 4x200 metres freestyle relay team have qualified for their final with the 3rd quickest time. James Hickman is into the final of the men's 200 metres individual medley. 2 real disappointments, though: Olympic bronze medalist Graham Smith failing to reach the final of the 1500, and Mark Foster 0.03 seconds away from a final place in the 50 metres sprint. On to cricket. It's been tough going in the opening match of the England tour of the West Indies. At the close of the first day of their 4-day match against Jamaica in Montego Bay, England were 179 for 5. Graham Thorpe is unbeaten on 41, and Sharjah captain Adam Hollyoak made 40. Now, this could be the day Newcastle United fans have been waiting for, the return of Alan Shearer. The England striker has missed the entire season after being injured in a pre-season friendly, but he could make his comeback today against Bolton at St James's Park.
We'll conduct ourselves in the same ways that we've done up to now, and we'll make decisions on Alan as responsibly as what we've done so far. And obviously, if he's done so well so far, the decisions that we've been making must have been pretty accurate. So we're not going to be stupid enough to act irresponsibly now. And he's in consideration, but that's all.
let's wish one day we get a smile from Kenny. Elsewhere in the Premiership, leaders Manchester United and Chelsea don't play today, so Blackburn have a chance to close the 7-point gap to 5. They're at home to Aston Villa. Liverpool visit Leicester City. It's been quite a week for Stoke City, a 7-0 home thrashing on Saturday, knocked out of the FA Cup on Tuesday, and the chairman resigned on Thursday. But last night, things looked up with a 2-1 victory over Bradford, breaking their 11-match losing run.
The Stoke fans arrived late to the Britannia Stadium as a protest over the running of the club and last week's 7-0 thrashing by Birmingham. But only minutes after they'd arrived, they saw their team go behind. John McGinley's header judged to have crossed the line before the goalkeeper could sweep it clear. 15 minutes later, Andrew O'Brien gave away a penalty for handling. Richard Forsyth's assured strike securing the equaliser for Stoke. A minute before half-time, Peter Thorne gave the Potters the lead with this great shot just out of Walsh's reach. In the second half, Stoke were almost handed a 2-goal lead by the Bradford goalie. The ball bobbled up out of his reach, but luckily ran wide, much to his relief. Bradford were unable to equalise, providing Stoke's manager Chick Bates with a satisfying win after a testing week. Tracy Moore, BBC News.
The goalkeeper was pleased it didn't go in. In Division 3 as well last night, Colchester United beat Torquay United 1-0. Now, a busy day of racing ahead with the big meeting at Ascot. They also go at Warwick, Newcastle and Lingfield Park. And our tip today, Bailey's Banker we call it, goodness knows why, Lord Dorset in the 2:20 at Ascot. I'm back with the headlines at 7.
Thanks very much, Robin. Now, care in the community is back in the headlines. It's always been a controversial programme. Critics argue it has put public safety at risk, while supporters say it has allowed some mental patients to make a return to something approaching a normal life. Now, the Health Secretary is preparing to scrap the scheme, saying the mentally ill mustn't be allowed to ruin, quotes, the quality of life of neighbours. Well, with me in the studio is Paul Farmer of the National Schizophrenia Fellowship. Good morning.
Morning.
What's your reaction to this news today?
Well, I think care in the community has failed many people, but it's also important to recognise that care in the community has transformed the lives of many people with severe mental illness or schizophrenia. And it would be a great shame, I think, if literally the headline were to be treated as such, because it's brought an awful lot of pleasure and improvement in terms of quality of lives to people. However, it's also important to recognise that there are many people who are still in mental hospitals who need maximum care and support, and it's important to make sure that those people receive that support.
A recent report found that 1 murder is committed every 2 weeks by a mental patient.
Well, there certainly has been the recent confidential report on suicides and homicides indicated, first of all, that whilst there was a number of people who committed murders who were suffering from a mental illness, it was less than 15% of the overall total. So I think it's easy to blow up the image that everybody who's been released into the community is a potential killer, and it simply isn't true. In fact, they're much more likely to harm themselves than they are to harm others. But perhaps more importantly, they're much more likely to do neither, much more likely to simply try and get on with their lives and receive, hopefully, the support that they need in order to do that.
What is your concern about this idea?
Well, I think our primary concern is to make sure that it isn't simply a question of trying to cut back on the existing resources that are there for mental illness. I mean, it isn't a cheap area to run, simply because every individual has their own needs. So you can't simply say the mentally ill require a particular piece of support, because each individual requires their own support. And what we want to make sure is that there are absolutely adequate resources, both for people who have severe needs, who will probably always spend their time in some sort of residential care, but also for people who want to go into the community, that they're adequately supported by the community in terms of social care, proper accommodation, the opportunity for them to work, and the chance for them to be actually live normal lives.
If, as you say, the crunch therefore is adequate resources, your group has been involved in consultation with the government. You must have some indication of what they're thinking in terms of this policy, in terms of funding it.
Well, we were very pleased when Paul Betang and Frank Dobson set up the independent reference group, which was to look at the programme of closure of the hospitals. And there certainly have been some discussions about the best way to provide support. But at this stage, there certainly haven't been clear decisions made about how that support is going to be provided. And I think we are anxious that already strapped resources, both for care and community and for residential care, are going to be further tightened because of spending cuts.
So you're surprised to hear that care in the community is basically out the window?
Well, I think we're very surprised given the amount of energy, effort and time that's been put in to transform the lives of many. We also want to make sure that there is appropriate residential care for those with most acute needs.
There's a quote from Frank Dobson in this interview saying that, referring to the quality of life of neighbours, do you think he is danger that he's pandering to the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard?
Well, I think there is a danger that people who are worried by a care and community project coming into their area do tend to feel as though this is going to devalue their house prices and so on and so forth. But if you go back now, a few years on, to those projects which have become established in the community, the vast majority of neighbours that you go and talk to will say that it's presented no difficulties, hasn't been nearly as bad as they thought it might be. And in fact, it was more a question of a fear that was based on ignorance rather than a fear that's based on prejudice.
Okay, well, let's look at some of the cases where care in the community obviously didn't work, the more extreme cases, which you would put down to what? To the fact that there was not enough resources securing these people in the community?
Well, I think we do have to acknowledge that there are many cases where people haven't been properly supported, and I think the great anxiety, particularly in the last year or so, was that people were being discharged from hospital without adequate provision for their support in the community, and that is invariably where people fall through the net, which is that they are discharged from hospital perhaps after many years of institutionalisation. They don't have the support that they need, and then they go into a downward spiral of despair because the nature of the condition is such that the distress that has been caused perhaps by this great change for them is such that they may feel themselves on a very unstable ground, and that in turn can bring on periods of psychosis, which in turn can lead to violent episodes, which I think is the danger. But I think with adequate care, with appropriate support, there can be success stories too.
Adequate care, appropriate support in the community, not in the hospitals, the institutions.
Well, I think the problem which happened some time ago, and there are many several well highlighted cases, was that there were some people who were clearly discharged before they were ready, and it was probably that they were discharged because of the priority of closing the hospital rather than the priority of caring for that individual. And I think it is important to make sure that for those people who do need residential care, that there is support within hospitals to do that, and clearly there need to be sufficient beds for us to be able to do that.
Is your understanding from this that the hospital closure programme will just be stopped and these institutions, which used to be known as sort of old Victorian mental asylums, will be reinstituted?
No, I think it's very unlikely that they'll all be opened up again, since many of them have been sold off or turned into residential accommodation of a different type. I think what seems to be more likely is that specific smaller residential care units will be established, and I think if that is the direction in which the minister's going, then that's to be welcomed, because anybody who's been to the old asylum will be amazed how anybody can have any decent quality of life from living in those.
It's something that is going to depend on funding. Paul Farmer, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Right, before we go to the weather forecast, let's have a quick look at the inside of the newspapers. We saw the front pages a few moments ago. Now we have the fascinating chase for the pigs, which of course has come to an end. The problem is, who won it? Right, this is the Daily Mail. Now if you read each paper, you'll find they've each been successful on this, as the Mail saves runaway porkers and ensures them a life, So that's the Mail doing it, and then we turn to the Express, and we have almost identical coverage, and we have, after finding Butch, the Express tracks down "We finish the great hog hunt." The key issue is the detail. Look at the detail of each story. You'll find some found, some caught, some have got one pig and others have got another.
This is, I'm sorry, I'm just standing. This is page 3 of the Mirror. Aldricker, portrait of the gladiator blonde as a white-haired gran, 34 years on. And what they've done is taken shots of people and aged them, which doesn't strike me as terribly fair. The year is 2032. This is Ulrika. This, and I don't know if you can see, is the EastEnder Martine, Tiffany, with grey hair, except she doesn't look too very different. Zoe Ball, and the model Caprice, which all just rather strikes me as envy.
Right, weather forecast now with Dan Corbett. Dan.
Well, thanks very much. You two having some fun with those papers there. But we're going to have some fun with our weather today as far as things go. Let me show you the European satellite to start. And you say, look at all these globs of clouds. But let's put it into motion first off. And you see one little spiralling area of cloud right across the Alps. Maybe some good news for the skiers. But look at this. You're wondering about the weekend? Oh, gosh. Big swirl of grey coming towards us. So a washout for a weekend? No, probably not. But some spots might pick up some rain, at least during the course of the morning hours. So let's pop the fronts on and you say, oh, it's a bit of a mess, really. All the fronts all over the place. One low sitting over the northern parts of the Mediterranean. Another spiralling system over Scandinavia, giving them some snow. But here's our little troublemaker for the weekend, perhaps. One little weak little fellow sitting across the northern parts of Scotland for the day. Bit more cloud, maybe some early rains. And then this fellow sitting out to the west, further to the west, will give us more of some rains during later on Saturday into Sunday. We look at the satellite over the British Isles and, oh yes, still managing some peaks of sunshine. That'll be the story over southern spots early on, but notice some green all ready to talk about on the map, yes, across sections of really northern England. Some of it's not even touching the ground. From northern England, western parts of Scotland, and then all the cloud back to the west with our weather system that'll pump its way in. So yeah, it might not be the best weekend for the sunglasses, but it's not going to be a complete washout yet, I'd say. Let's put things into motion for the day. And fairly nice across many of the southern parts through the early part of the day. Sunshine perhaps, but filling in with the clouds and the rains, let's say from the northern parts of England to the western parts of Scotland, where temperatures in some spots of Scotland are below zero. So it'll be falling in that wintry form. Some spots even fairly close to the surface this morning. The wintry showers will be falling when you'll probably pick up several centimetres in those higher spots where you'd probably expect them. And through the afternoon, yeah, still some rains to talk about, but primarily northern parts of England to western parts of Scotland, that wintry type showers. But yes, we'll stay dry in many spots to the south, to the west. Not a bad day, but not the best day to get out those new sunglasses type thing. And notice these rains coming into the west that'll feed in towards southern parts later on tonight into tomorrow. Temperature-wise, well, not bad, not great, but a 9 or so in the south, it's fairly bearable. 7 or so for the Midlands. The cold spot is going to be in northern parts of Scotland, where Aberdeen, for instance, we might struggle with a 2 or a 3 for a high, and in those Grampians, some spots might not even get above zero, so that might be a bit of a chill. As far as things over Europe, not bad. Lovely in Spain, a bit chilly for the folks in Moscow there, 0 for their temperature, and with maybe even the chance for some snow. Rome's not bad, looking at 16, slight chance for some rain. That's the weather for us for now.
For millions of people, it's just another day. But for some, their lives will never be the same again.
It made us almost feel beyond being human.
Scrutinised for all the world to see.
I really learned just how powerful the media can be.
For the first time, News 24 profiles ordinary people thrust into the glare of intense media exposure. How did it change their lives? Facing the Crowd finds out. Sunday morning at 5:30 on BBC News 24 and BBC One.
You're watching BBC News 24, the latest news at 6:32. Community care has failed, according to the Health Secretary Frank Dobson in a national newspaper interview today. Ever since the introduction of care in the community in 1990, it's been beset by problems. Now the government is to draw up proposals for new psychiatric care centres.
In an attempt to do away with bleak Victorian mental asylums, the Conservatives launched their care in the community policy in 1990. But ever since its introduction, it's failed to protect the public from the seriously mentally ill. With one murder committed every 2 weeks, Jonathan Zito and Jonathan Newby are just 2 of the victims of mentally ill patients in recent years. The Health Secretary, Frank Dobson, says in today's Daily Telegraph that care in the community has failed. He wants to see new residential institutions with unstable patients in smaller units under the supervision of medical staff. And he says when we know the scale of the problem, we'll need to think where the money can come from. I don't think it's going to be so low that you can do it with a whip around. The first step will be a review of mental health care to be conducted by Junior Health Minister Paul Boateng. The aim will be to identify the numbers needing round-the-clock care. Although the process of change has now begun, it may be some time before any benefits are felt. It's expected a mental incapacity bill won't be drawn up much before the end of the year. Samantha Simmons, BBC News.
The Mardi Gras bomber appears to have struck again. An explosive device was found last night near a Sainsbury's supermarket at Chiswick in West London. The bomber waged an 18-month campaign against Barclays Bank before beginning attacks on Sainsbury's. The 7th anniversary of the Gulf War is being marked in Baghdad, just as tension in the region climbs once again. Demonstrations have been held in support of the President Saddam Hussein. In the next few hours, he's addressing the Iraqi people. It's thought he'll deliver a defiant message to America and Britain over the continuing dispute about weapons inspections. Britain's announced that it's stepping up its military presence in the area. The Royal Navy carrier Invincible is on its way to the region. Gulf War veterans will demonstrate in London today on the 7th anniversary of the conflict in protest at their treatment by the Ministry of Defence. Dozens of veterans are preparing to hand back their medals as anger mounts at what they see is inaction over Gulf War syndrome. They claim more than 100 have died and thousands made ill due to taking drugs to protect them against chemical weapons. The accountants for the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund have agreed to waive their fees. The decision is bound to cause further embarrassment to the fund's lawyers, Mishcon de Rea, who have charged £500,000 for the work the firm has done. Coopers & Lybrand, the accountancy firm, is reported to have agreed to waive around £250,000. House building on greenfield sites is taking over from road building as the biggest threat to the British countryside. A range of campaigning groups are meeting today to discuss how to prevent what they claim will be a massive wave of new house building in rural areas. Developers argue that urban sites can only provide a small part of the housing solution. Now, if you thought a long-haul flight to Australia was a bit of a trek, imagine going all 14,000 miles by Microlight. Well, that's what a British pilot, Colin Bodil, has done, and he's managed to make it in record time. He landed in Sydney in the early hours of this morning and is on the line from there now. Congratulations, you must be thrilled.
Yes, very happy to be here in one piece.
How long did it take?
It's taken 39 days in total from leaving London City.
And what was the trip like?
Oh, well, it's had its good moments and frightening moments, full of excitement and frustration.
Are you very tired now?
Yes, I am. I'm not too bad because I've got used to flying all day long, you know.
Now, I understand you were raising money for the Princess Diana Memorial Fund. Do you know how much you've raised yet?
I've no idea because it's all been coronated back in London, but I do understand it's quite a substantial amount, and it's good news to hear that the accountants have just decided to waive some fees.
Yes. Now, as far as the microlighting is concerned, many people might not even have heard of it, and yet there are two other British pilots who are planning to circle the globe in 80 days. They're setting off within the next couple of months. It does seem extraordinary. Could you explain, well, you better explain first of all about the microlight itself.
Yes, well, this is a weight shift type microlight. It looks a little bit like a hang glider with a trike unit, so you could call it a powered hang glider type, really. It's built in Rochdale in England by Main Air Sport. And it's a very reliable machine. It's got me all the way to Australia without missing a beat. You know, it's a credit to the aircraft, really.
You must feel very exposed up there, particularly for such long distances. What's the attraction?
Well, the attraction really was, it was just we had to think of something really unusual to raise interest for the charity, and this was about the most unusual thing we could think of at the time. I mean, it's what I do best is flying. It was a natural choice, really, to do it. We've travelled between 15,500 feet over the Alps and as low as 20 feet over the sea, and there's done 5,000 miles over the sea. It's been quite an epic adventure.
Well, Colin Bodil, thank you very much. We hope you sleep well.
All right, thank you.
Now then, we have with us Tony Flint from the Gulf War Families and Veterans, because, as we were hearing earlier, 50 veterans will be handing back their medals today. 7 years after the Gulf War, it is the anniversary of 7 years. Tony Flint, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. You're handing back the medals. We heard in a report earlier that some veterans feel that really this isn't the right time to be doing it. I should explain this is, of course, because of Gulf War syndrome. You're not happy with the way the government's dealing with that. But some veterans say an anniversary isn't really the time to make a political point like this, because we should be commemorating those who have died.
Well, in actual fact, we are commemorating those that have died. This is actually taking place at the Cenotaph tomorrow. The reason why I think today has been picked is just to highlight the situation that we are all still suffering and we are dying.
What's gone wrong? Because when we had a new government, it said that it would handle the issue differently from the Conservatives. You were all meant to be relieved to hear that. What's gone wrong?
Well, it started off well, you know, with promises, but it's just been all talk. There's no positive action. They're still talking about 2-3 years away from reaching any conclusions with their research. But what's so annoying, most of this research has already been done in America 2-3 years ago.
Well, the argument, though, is that it still is being done in America, isn't it? And that we need to rely on the Americans because they have a greater knowledge of this sort of thing. I mean, the government would say that they had a 20-point plan as to how to deal with this. This came out last July. Since then, they've met you 3 times. And that it is moving forward, that they've also helped with medical advice.
Well, I'll dispute that with it helping with medical advice, because I know from my own personal experience, I've been through the medical assessment program like they advised us all to do. Only last weekend I got a letter from their doctors saying, right, we've examined you, we found that you've got nerve damage all down the right side of your body, now we're going to leave it up to your GP to deal with it.
It's totally difficult, though, isn't it, to actually be 100% certain as to why everybody, I say everybody, why so many people are ill. I mean, there are different arguments as to whether it was a cocktail of drugs injected into you, whether it was the result of chemical warfare, effectively, and the exploding of arms dumps which had chemicals in them. I mean, you must appreciate, or do you not, that it is difficult to pin down and therefore to be certain how to deal with it?
Well, the government say that there's no scientific or medical proof. None of us are scientists, but what we have found out ourselves, just by talking to other people, is that we know for a fact the commander of the French forces refused to allow any of his men to have the vaccines or the tablets. None of them appeared to be ill. Our pilots and navigators never had the vaccines or the tablets. None of them appear to be ill. But our battle casualty replacements, who never came out to the Gulf, so they never had the nerve agent tablets, they never come in contact with organophosphates or any other chemicals that were in the Gulf, but they were vaccinated, ready to come out. They never left the UK or Germany. Some of those guys are ill. So the vaccines look a prime suspect.
Well, it's a considerable protest you're putting up today, the handing back of medals. We've heard over the last few days veterans involved in that saying they're very sad to be handing back medals. Problem is that the government's also described it as sad. I mean, do you think that it will make any difference?
Well, it will hopefully highlight the problems that we are facing. Those medals, okay, they're stuck in a drawer or on a shelf, but they don't buy our food. You know, we've got guys there today that have actually had to sell their medals to provide care for their family. And this is what we're protesting about, that, you know, nothing is being done on a practical level.
All right, well, Tony Flint, thank you very much indeed for coming in to speak to us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
You're watching BBC News 24, the new round-the-clock TV news channel. BBC News 24, bringing you the whole picture, the whole time.
This is the Now O'Clock News from the BBC.
It's just coming up to 7:15, taking a look at our headlines. Seriously disturbed psychiatric patients to be returned to secure units in a major change of the Care in the Community programme. About 50 Gulf War veterans are due to return their medals to the Ministry of Defence today in protest at the government's handling of Gulf War syndrome. 21 people have died after a Cypriot-registered cargo ship sailing from Rotterdam to Montreal sank off the coast of Newfoundland. And protest groups fighting government plans for millions of new homes around Britain are meeting in London today, hoping to form a national force to protect rural areas.
Now, he is not what you would expect as a mascot, but at 16 years old, Laddie, the arthritic Shire horse, has been adopted by firefighters in Wiltshire. Why? Well, because they had to rescue him so often, they feel he's become part of the team.
It's into the well-grooved routine for the part-time firefighters of Microlight. Ready to respond to any emergency, the crew of Romeo 1-2 are scrambled yet again. It could be anything from a blazing building or a motorway pile-up. Actually, today, they're turning out for something altogether different. It's time to make a fuss of their newly adopted mascot. At 16, Laddie suffers from arthritis and sometimes can't get up after lying down for a snooze. Weighing the best part of a ton, if he's not helped, he could die. 3 times now, Romeo 1-2 has roared up the road and spent hours in the mud hauling Laddie back onto his hooves.
It was getting embarrassing getting the fire brigade out, so I was coming to the decision that I'd have to have him put down, which, as you can see, I don't want to do. And these guys, they sensed that, and they got in touch and said, look, we'll always come out.
So with the threat of the vet's bullet lifted, Laddie can happily live out the rest of his days with his best friend Harry. And if one morning he can't get to his feet, Romeo 1-2 will be there for him, even in their spare time.
If we can't get the fire engine to come up for any reason, then we are prepared as a station to come up and help the owner with his horse to get him back on his feet, yes.
Laddie and Harry were rescued by Len and Celia Goodhue 9 years ago because they were neglected and in poor condition. At the time, Laddie was nervous and wild, and the best advice was to have him shot. The Goodhues would hear nothing of it. And now, after helping him out so often, Crickleight's finest decided the only thing left they could do was to make him their mascot.
The lads all got together and said, you know, he's so nice. And we've never had an actual animal mascot before, so it's something different, and he's lovely. And you can see that for yourself. I mean, he looks really well. He's well looked after.
And from now on, as station mascot, Laddie can look forward to plenty more treats.
Now then, there is plenty of football around today. We saw Robin Bailey with the sport earlier, Alan Shearer coming back. One of the big games involves Arsene Wenger, manager of Arsenal. He's challenged his young guns to show they've matured enough to keep Arsenal's season alive. They're in 5th place at the moment. They take on a rejuvenated Coventry at Highfield Road this afternoon. But that's without the injured stars Ian Wright, Mark Overmars, Tony Adams and David Platt. Meanwhile, Coventry are still left wondering about the future of their striker Dion Dublin. So, to preview today's game, I'm joined now by Tony Madden, who is editor of the Highbury High fanzine. Good morning. And also in our Birmingham studio, Mick Rose, editor of the Sky Blue Army fanzine. Good morning.
Morning.
Right then, we've got a fair old battle today because both sides are sort of, you know, trying to do their equal things at different ends of the table. What do you think is going to happen today?
I can see Arsenal snatching a win today. I'd have been happier if Ian Wright was playing and Mark Overmars, but I still think we're starting to head back into a bit of form. I think we could nick today's match.
And Mick, what worries you most about today's match?
I think it's a question of whether he's going to play Dion Dublin today, and if he does, what the crowd reaction will be to him.
I think the suggestion was that he would play him, and indeed. This is Gordon Strachan, your manager, of course, that I think Strachan was saying he hoped it wouldn't be his last game, indeed, because just to explain, Dion Dublin looks as if he's heading towards Middlesbrough. So you think he may not play?
No, I think he will, but I think the problem might be that the crowd will get onto him because of all the problems that have been this week, and that could have an adverse effect then on the rest of the team.
So Dion Dublin, I mean, when you say crowd gets onto him, what do you mean? How's that going to manifest itself?
Well, I think everyone's a bit fed up that he's been offered the biggest contract in the club's history, and he's turned it down, and everyone, I think, seen him as a bit of a greedy person and no loyalty to the club. So I think he might get a bit of a backlash from the fans today.
So does that mean you've got no chance today?
No, I think we'll win 3-0.
How do you work that one out then? How can you win 3-0 when you've just said that if you've got Dion Dublin on, the crowd's against him? How are you going to win with the crowd against your own star?
Well, I think Arsenal are there for the taking. This is probably the lowest point I've seen them for a long, long time. And if we can stop Dennis Bergkamp playing today with the rest of the injuries they've got, then we've got an excellent chance of winning.
Well, I suppose you were beaten 2-0 last time against Arsenal. Tony, you're there for the taking.
Yeah, that's news to me. We haven't lost for 6 games, so quite how we're there for the taking, I can't understand. Lots of teams have tried to stop Dennis Bergkamp and haven't been able to. I think he's due a league goal soon. He hasn't had one since October. I think.
Well, strikers Port Vale was his last one, and that was the first in what 9 or 10 matches.
I think it's been a while. Mind you, he's been suspended for a couple of those, but I think, but you know, I don't agree with there for the taking. And not many people will ever put 3 past Arsenal. So.
I mean, Arsenal you're one of the. It's this intriguing season where we have 2 or 3 clubs that are sort of possibly could make it for the Premiership, but you're not quite getting there.
No, I think we had a poor November and we had a poor December. I don't know why really, because we were playing so well going into that, but we certainly just couldn't seem to hit the right track. But I think we're slowly edging back into a bit of form at the moment.
I suppose you're only 5 points, I think, behind Chelsea in second place. Is that right?
And a game in hand on them, yeah.
And a game in hand.
And then to come to Highbury in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. So
of course,
I mean, that could easily turn around.
The intriguing thing here, Mick, of course, is that Coventry are 5th from bottom as opposed to 5th from top. But you're, I think, 5 points off bottom. Yes, you are 5 points off bottom. I mean, it's the same old story for Coventry, isn't it? Gordon Strachan just about keeping you out of the nationwide league.
Yeah, we're in our usual position at this time of the year. We're actually on a run at the moment of decent form. He's signed a couple of players, and there seems a whole new confidence about the place, and the fans feel that this is a right team now and the right balance. We were unlucky to get beat 3-1 at Chelsea last week, but after 2 good results before that, I think everyone's really up for today's game. I think we fancy it to do them.
Mick, what you we were saying in our colleague Robin Bailey was saying in Sport before about Alan Shearer coming back. It's all over the sports pages today. Are you worried about that at all, with England coming up to the World Cup, that maybe he's come back a little bit too early?
I think Alan Shearer knows when he's ready and not. I mean, if you've listened to him all the way through his injury, I think he's been very sensible, and the things he's been saying about it, I don't think he'll rush himself back in. I hope he doesn't, because England desperately need him for the World Cup.
The bizarre thing is, I should really be asking Tony, does that make a difference to Arsenal if Newcastle now have Shearer? But in a sense, it makes more of a difference to Coventry, doesn't it? Because they're right down with you.
If we win today, I think we're on the same points as Newcastle, so that just shows you how bad a season they are having.
I mean, I suppose that could mean that you've got a tougher battle of it with Shearer back, because Shearer's bound to make a huge difference to Newcastle, even if they have lost a Spree.
No, I mean, I think it's a false position Newcastle are in. They're not a poor side, they're a good side, they're full of internationals. And they'll bounce back. They won't be anywhere near the relegation come the end of the season.
Mind you, some people said they've been nowhere near where they are now at this stage. But Tony, you bothered at all about that? I'm just thinking, broadening it out now a bit to the World Cup. Does it bother you at all that he's back now?
Shearer, I mean, I can't see Newcastle rushing him back before he's ready. I mean, that'd be foolish. I mean, if he's ready to come back today, Dalglish will pick him, and he'll make a difference to any side. Wasn't it, really, Shearer? He's such a great player.
Because he makes, from an Arsenal fan's point of view, he makes an intriguing difference to the selection of the England side, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think, in terms of Ian Wright, will Wright go to France or not? I think one place has always been booked, and Shearer's place has always been there. I mean, he's always going to be on that plane. I think the rest of them are scrapping it out for who's going to play up with him in France. If Wright can get back into form, score a few more goals, then why not? Because I think he's played ever so well for England. He's not let them down in the last year.
Oh, well, it's just finishing on the Premiership. How do you think things are shaping up now? I mean, is Man United going to run away with it?
I hate to say it, but yes, I think they are. I think the rest of us are all scrapping out for second place, and you know, second place takes you into the Champions League. We nearly made it last year, and I think we can make it this year. I think, you know, we were at the start of the season showing the best form apart from United. Probably at the start of the season we were playing better than United. And I think people who are writing us off have just been foolish. You know, you can come back into that sort of form quite easily, and I think we will do.
This is once again, it's London clubs just sort of battling to be the best from London rather than actually winning,
unfortunately at the moment, but it won't stay like
that one in. Anyway, Tony in the studio and Mick in Birmingham. Good luck to both of you today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, 7 years on from the Gulf War, and once again the world's facing heightened tension in the region. Saddam Hussein is refusing to cooperate with UN weapons inspectors, and Britain and the US are building up their military presence in the Gulf. In just over an hour, we'll hear what Saddam has to say for himself in a speech to the Iraqi people. First, we go live on the line to Baghdad, and our correspondent there, Raghi Omar. Raghi, the HMS Invincible is on her way to the Gulf with the threat of military action again. We have seen this before, but Saddam has always backed down before. Does it look any different this time?
No, not in the sense that there are any indications that the Iraqi leader or the Iraqi government is going to back down. We've seen absolutely no indication, and they have been consistent to be accurate over the last 3 months in saying that if it should come to military confrontation, they were prepared for anything. And I don't think they've given any indication at all, A, that there's any sign or spirit of compromise on their part, or B, that they are going to be militarily intimidated by any action. The HMS Invincible is on its way to the Gulf, but there's already a massive American military armada of dozens of warships, aircraft carriers, destroyers already in the Gulf. They've been there since the end of last year, and that hasn't made the Iraqis budge 1 inch.
So what is the likelihood, do you think, that force will be used this time?
I think it's looking more possible, certainly, since than anything else since this crisis erupted back in the beginning of November. If only because we've seen senior Iraqi officials and members of the American administration and British of senior officials, such as the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook, all of them saying within several days of each other that their patience is wearing thin, and that avenues for resolving this crisis diplomatically are fast being exhausted. And I think with that kind of language, there must be more indication than there has been previously that for the first time ever since this crisis erupted, military action is an increasing possibility.
We saw scenes last night, anti-Western protests, support for Saddam Hussein. He's speaking this morning. What's he likely to say?
I think it's going to be a complete restatement of the Iraqi position. I don't think there's going to be any doubt that Saddam Hussein is going to say that Iraq will not bow to the will of the United Nations unless there are at least fundamental changes to the nature and scope of weapons inspections operations here in Iraq. And I think the fact that this is taking place on the 7th anniversary of the start of the Gulf War, when the air bombardment campaign began, is also just likely to make him even more confrontational, even more adamant in the tone of his speech. And we know that it's going to be a 26